favorite people, and you will enjoy him. He comes from a long place to be with us. Now, our next meeting will be Monday, March the 3rd, 10 o'clock with Dr. Wayne Bowen, and he'll talk about foreign labor in Nazi Germany's collaborators. Adolf Hitler's wars of aggression and conquest generated tremendous demand for labor to build weapons, ammunition, and fortification for the armed forces of the Third Reich. With millions of German men mobilized in uniform, and the Nazis reluctant to force German women into factories, the use of foreign labor was a necessary expedient. Importing non-Germans, however, ran in direct conflict with the Nazi ideologically and racial utopia. Now, how then did the Nazi leaders accommodate more than 10 million foreign workers into the third whatever? Got it. Or semi-conscripted workers from occupied territories in Western Europe. What impact did these foreigners and the need to keep them productive have on Nazi ideology in word and deed? And this is the presentation we're going to hear from Dr. Wayne Bowen on Monday, March the 3rd, and frankly, I've never heard of this. So you would need to come and hear something we've never heard before. So we'll see you here, March the 3rd. Now, history today. In 1863, Samuel Clemens first used the pen name of Mark Twain in the Virginia City newspaper. In 1870, the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution granting Black American men the right to vote. That amendment was ratified. Now, this is something that's haunted us all the way today. In 1887, to avoid disputed elections, the U.S. Congress created the Electoral Count Act. So that's where it came from. In 1913, the 16th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, creating the federal income tax, was ratified. In 1917, the U.S. ocean liner Housatonic was sunk by the German submarine on the same day that President Woodrow Wilson broke off diplomatic relations with Germany. In 1941, the Supreme Court upheld the wage and hour law, which sets minimum wages and maximum hours. In 1947, the first Black reporter was seated in the U.S. Congressional Gallery. In 1959, a plane crash known as the Day Music Died killed musician Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, J.P. Richardson, and of course the pilot in Iowa. In 1962, U.S. President John F. Kennedy banned all trade with Cuba except food and drugs. In 1965, 105 U.S. Air Force cadets resigned from the academy for cheating in exams. In 1969, ibuprofen was launched by the UK under the brand name of Brufen as a prescription medicine. It is now the world's most popular anti-inflammatory painkiller. In 1978, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and U.S. President Jimmy Carter met and discussed the Middle East peace process in Washington, D.C. This next item is not important, but I could not pass it up and wanted to share it with you. In 1990, jockey Bill Shoemaker retired after 40,350 horse races. That blew my mind, so I had to share it. I'm sorry. I couldn't pass that one up. In 1998, the U.S. Marine Corps aircraft sliced through a cable on a ski gondola near Cavalese, Italy, causing the car to plunge hundreds of feet and killing 20 people. In 2009, Eric Holder became the first African American to become the U.S. Attorney General. Now, the birthdays. Portuguese explorer Ferdinand Magellan, German composer Felix Mendelssohn. I also had to include this one. American gangster and FBI most wanted criminal Pretty Boy Floyd. Actor Shelley Berman, actress Peggy Ann Garner, actor Nathan Lane, human rights lawyer Amal Clooney. I'm done. And now it's my privilege to turn this mic over to co-chairman, Dr. Ovasitis.
Thank you, Sherry. Good morning. Today we are fortunate to have Jon Stewart as our history group presenter. John has a long-standing interest in the life of Thomas Jefferson, a passion that began during his time as a student at the University of Virginia. Over the past 15 years, he has engaged multiple audiences by presenting in character as Jefferson, a method that has proven especially effective in capturing the attention of both adults and children alike. As President Thomas Jefferson faced a growing threat from privateers supported by the Barbary state pirates along North African coast, these pirates were targeting American ships and demanding a tribute in exchange for safe passage. In today's presentation, Jon Stewart will delve into the pivotal moment in American history, exploring Jefferson's bold actions against these Barbary pirates. So please join me in welcoming Jon Stewart to the stage for this presentation on Thomas Jefferson and the Barbary pirates. So on behalf of the history group of the University Club, let's give Mr. Thomas Jefferson, yes, Mr. Thomas Jefferson, a warm round of applause. Mr. Jefferson.
Greetings, fellow citizens. It's not necessary for you to get up. The president isn't coming in the room, but I am the most informal president, at least of the first three. I'm a lawyer, so when I say things like that, some people ask me to prove it, so let me try this. When Washington was inaugurated, in which town? New York, right. He arrived in a carriage, white and gold carriage, drawn by 6 white horses. Now that's fairly modest by European standards, but it's pretty elegant for the new United States. And then next president was John Adams. And John Adams was inaugurated where? Which city? Philadelphia, in Congress Hall, exactly. John arrived in more modest style. He came in a tan carriage drawn by 2 white horses. And then the next president, a different president, was I. Which town was I inaugurated in? Washington, D.C. Yeah, I was part of the deal that made Washington, D.C. And I was happy to be inaugurated on the still being completed Capitol building. I walked with some of my friends to get to the Capitol building. And as I'm walking here, I'm walking to my technical advisor who's going to help me with, seems we have a storm in here. How's this? Is this better? Okay, good. Okay, so I walked to my inauguration. I wore a green suit, and I made a very pretty speech. It went something like this. The key part of it was, let us now, fellow citizens, unite with one heart and one mind. Not every difference of opinion is a difference of principle. We have called by different names brothers of the same principle. We are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. Those were the two parties that had just developed. They were our first political parties. And that speech was pretty well received, and I went on to a fairly successful administration. The reason I had to do that was because the Federalists had tried to steal the election of 1800. They didn't want a change in power. They wanted John Adams to get his second term as president. And they somehow, with their skullduggery, even though I won the popular vote, they arranged for a tie in the college. So what happens when there's a tie in the college, the Electoral College? Goes to the House of Representatives, right? So it went to the House, which is the old House of the Federalists, right, for me. And they had a vote. That you vote by states in this elections, and there were 16 states by then, the original 13, plus Tennessee and Kentucky and Vermont. And the vote came out 8-4-6 against and 2 undecided. How many do we need? Half of 16 is 8, we need 9. So the vote is undecided. They were doing this in the snow. They thought they were going to be done, but it didn't happen. So they voted again, undecided. Anybody want to venture a guess how many undecideds they had? 35. Took all week. 35. Finally, Alexander Hamilton, who had been a principal in arranging this problem in the first place, because he wanted to avoid, quote, the fangs of Jefferson. He got Bayard of Delaware to change his vote, and I was elected president on the 36th vote. Now, that in itself is probably more entertaining than what you all have been through in the last few elections. But I would maintain that that was the most vicious presidential election in our history, right up to the current. And the reason I say that, I'm still lawyering you, sorry, is that I haven't heard anybody talk about secession from the states yet. But they were talking secession when the election of 1800 was coming. Well, we came here, you all came here to hear about the Barbary pirates today. but I just thought I'd add that little asterisk to your current events today. Let's start in 1783. I'm in Paris. I've been there about a year. I'm living here in this Hotel Langeac, which is in Paris. I'm minister plenipotentiary to the court of Louis XVI, and I'm over there to try to maintain good relations with the French, which is not hard for me because I'm a Francophile. Also to sign some commercial agreements so that we can get our commerce going. The war was not kind to our commerce, and so we were trying to do the best we could. So here I am in the Hotel Langeac, and Captain O'Brien and the men of the Dolphin are captured off of Portugal, and they're taken to Algiers as slaves, and then the Maria is captured, and there's more slaves, and they endured sufferings for 10 years. Several of the captives would die in captivity of yellow fever, overwork, and exposure. The only way out was to convert to Islam, escape, or wait for their country to negotiate their release. Here's a picture of what the Dolphin looked like. And here's sort of a map of a situation here. We're talking about the Barbary Coast, which is the north coast of Africa. And the main towns in those days were Algiers, Tunis, Tripoli, Derna, and Alexandria. Punishment for slaves was gruesome. Impaling, castration, being thrown off city walls, and of course beating. Any Christian who insulted Islam could be burned alive, and discovery in a relationship with a Muslim woman meant beheading. Here's a graphic of the kind of care that the Muslims were giving their slaves. Captain O'Brien writes to me in '85, "Our sufferings are beyond our expression or your conception." The Islamic nations were preying on foreign shipping and had been for centuries. They ranged beyond the Mediterranean into the North African coast. The first ship that I talked about was captured outside of the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean. The pirates ranged pretty far in search of slaves and plunder. Most of the navies, they were either too strong for the pirates to attack them, or they paid a tribute. And even Britain and France sometimes did, just to get them out of their hair, because it was cost less than going out and defeating them. The colonies initially protected us. The colonies were protected by the British Navy. And then after France joined, they were protected by the French Navy. But after independence, the truth emerged in the prediction of Lord Sheffield a couple of years ago. It is not probable the American states will have a very free trade in the Mediterranean. They cannot protect themselves as they cannot pretend to have a navy. That was about as welcome as a lot of other English pronouncements in those days, but it was absolutely right. Our government originally paid for the pirates, but they kept asking more and more. So we were forced to let our ships sail at their risk, and sailors like those on the Maria and the Dolphin became pawns in a very nasty game. Now, my good friend at this time, this is before the vicious, nasty election, was John Adams. And John is the ambassador to England. And he writes to me saying, we need to talk about this problem with the pirates. So he called a meeting. I was in Paris, but I went across the channel and we got together in London. John says he's befriended Sidi Haji Abdurrahman, Tripoli's ambassador to England. And he thinks he's a reasonable guy. I had been doing some research about what various entities were paying the pirates, so I thought I knew what the going rate was, and so we thought we'd, negotiate with the ambassador. That turned out to be impossible to do. We don't have a picture of the ambassador, but this is something like he would look when he was dressed up. He asked for $120,000 plus a $12,000 tip for himself for peace in Tripoli. And he thought Tunis would be about the same. He didn't know about Morocco, but he was sure that Algeria would be more. We had in our pockets combined $80,000 to spend on this. So it was an impossible situation. John says, asks him, why do you pick on nations like you do? What gives you the right to do that? And Abdurrahman says, it's my holy book, the Quran. The Quran says, quote, all nations which had not acknowledged the prophet were sinners, whom it was the right and duty of all the faithful to plunder and enslave. And another quote, every Muslim who was slain in this warfare was sure to go to paradise. Those are strong incentives. So our meeting ended in no agreement. After that, we got together, and John and I disagreed. It was a friendly disagreement, but he wanted to continue on with the way we'd been doing it. I'm not sure where he thought he was going to get the money. I said, I don't trust the pirates. I should prefer the obtaining of it by war. I wrote him on July 6, 1786. And I added that America needs a navy to protect its commerce. Not everyone who has studied my political career would call me a hawk. The embargo is something that comes to mind. But in this particular case, I'm the hawk. I'd written to my neighbor, James Monroe, a couple of years ago, if they refuse a fair treaty, the pirates, why not go to war with them? We ought to begin a naval power if we mean to carry on our own commerce. Can we begin it on a more honorable occasion or with a weaker foe? Half a dozen frigates could totally destroy their commerce. That's hawkish talk. But the pirates keep going on, enslaving more Christians, men, women. They're pretty violent people. I also proposed a security treaty with several of the other smaller players that were experiencing the same problems we were, but that didn't work out. Congress would not join. Remember, the Articles of Confederation just had a legislature. They didn't have an executive, and they didn't have a court. And they didn't have the power to demand taxes. They could ask for contributions from the state, but it was the states who raised the taxes and then made contributions. So money was difficult all throughout the war, the Revolutionary War, and beyond, which is why in the next year, what happens? We have a constitutional convention to amend the articles, but it soon turns into let's scrap them and start over again. So that didn't work out. My confederation didn't work out with these other countries. Now in 1790, I arrived in New York to take up the duties as first Secretary of State under President Washington. And just in a few days, we discussed the plight of Captain O'Brien and his captive men in Algeria. Okay, it's 85, he's captured. He's been in jail or prison, or his men have been in slavery for over 5 years. It's awful. So we were talking about what we could do, but we couldn't do much because we didn't have a navy. We had somewhat of a navy. John Paul Jones comes to mind in the Revolutionary War. but not much of one. And after that, whatever we had was sold because George was really, well, it's a fairly common sense point of view that our Navy, which is non-existent, is not, whatever they build, is not going to defeat the British sovereign of the seas, which have over 1,000 warships in the water at the same time. It's just, but on the other hand, you have to start somewhere. So I wrote a couple of studies, which I gave to Congress. One is on the prisoners and their terrible plights, and the other is on the trade. And I said, it rests with Congress to decide between war or tribute and ransom as the means of reestablishing our commerce. So what did Congress decide? Pay. They continue to have our sailors throw money at the feet of the pirates. After 4 more years go, the United States finally buys peace with the day and ransoms those soldiers. That's been over 10 years. But also, they get started. Washington signs an act to provide a naval armament, and it provides for 6 frigates to be constructed, 4 of 44 guns and 2 with the usual 36 guns. The Americans decided that they wanted more firepower, and one of the things that we had in abundance was lumber. So we could build ships where, England and France, the materials, particularly the wood to construct them, was dear, and they were trying to economize. We didn't have to do that at all. So we started building these, what were called the American heavy frigates. Here's a picture of one. She's still commissioned. You can go visit her and walk on her decks in Boston. She has sides of 21 inches thick. It's a laminate of 3 different kinds of woods, 2 kinds of pine and a cedar, an oak. And the cannonballs would bounce off of them if they weren't fired, really close. So the British soldiers said, that boat's got iron sides to it. And she became known as Old Ironsides. And the Constellation is one of the regular size frigates. We've come a long way from 2 of these, which was our Navy in the Revolutionary War. Now, let's come up to the time we were talking about before, which is when I'm becoming president. We still have the pirate problem. The Dey of Tripoli had told John Adams about 3 months before the election that if he didn't pay up in 6 months, they were going to declare all-out war on us. And John put that on his desk and left. And so I inherited this. And while I was trying to figure out, some other things, the Dey of Tripoli declared war on the United States. They didn't have the internet in those days, so he sawed down our flagpole in Tripoli at the embassy. That's how he declared it. It was going to take another 4 or 5 weeks for the word to get across the ocean on a boat. So we get together, we talk about it. In the flush of my election, I tend to get my way with my cabinet. So said, we have found it expedient to detach a squadron of observation into the Mediterranean. That's what's called a shot across the bow for the pirates. And then we sent Richard Dale with the Philadelphia, the President, Essex, and Enterprise to go over and start the war. Had some other soldiers that were sailors that had fit into the story, and that's William Bainbridge, and we have here Commander Stephen Decatur, but he was lieutenant when he first went. They start the shooting war on August 1st. The Enterprise fires into the Tripoli, which is a boat captained by a European. Mohammed Rouse is actually a converted Scotsman, but he's a pirate, and they didn't do very well. They lost 30 men. The ship was battered, and we lost none. The ships that we had actually had a firepower advantage in this particular battle, and generally with the pirates. They had faster boats, and sometimes they used barks that they could row, could go straight upwind, which a sailboat can't do. So they had some ability, but when it came down to just raw slugging it out with firepower cannons, with firing 18 and 24-pound balls at each other, we were better at that. Then I asked Congress for a declaration of war, and they finally came up with it in 1802, in February. It says, an act for the protection of commerce and seamen against the Tripolitan cruisers. Whereas the Regency of Tripoli on the coast of Barbary has commenced a predatory warfare against the United States, be it enacted by the Senate and House that in Congress assembled, that it should be lawful fully to equip office men and employ such of the armed vessels of the United States, which we now have, as may be judged requisite by the President for protecting effectually the commerce and seamen on the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean, and adjoining seas. And be it further enacted that they should be lawful for the President to instruct the commanders of the respective public vessels to subdue, seize, and make prize of all vessels, goods, and effect belonging to Tripoli or his subjects, and to bring or send the same in a port to be proceeded against, sold, and distributed according to law, and also to cause to be done all other acts of precaution or hostility as the state of war will justify and may, in his opinion, require. So the President now is authorized to prosecute this war, and I do. I'm not going to take you through the details of it. It lasted for 5 years for two reasons. One, we had personnel problems. We had Dale's successor was just married and had his wife on board, and he got as far as Gibraltar, and then he started to party, and he didn't get over to get at the pirates, which is a shame. The pirates also were, very skilled, so they caused some problems. But there are a couple of things I want to tell you about. One, I like this. The Philadelphia ran aground in Tripoli Harbor using a native pilot. Why they were using a native pilot, I don't know, but so it was on the rocks. We didn't want the pirates to get it and convert it into their warship, so we decided to burn it. And Stephen Decatur led a night raid to do just that. And he got some praise from Admiral Lord Nelson, the head of the British Navy. At this time, the British are not very happy with us. It's not too much longer, and we get into the War of 1812 with them. But Nelson says, that was the bravest act and the most bold and daring act of the age. So praise from your enemy is high praise indeed. The other thing I want to tell you about is the last battle, which is Dern. It's in 1805. General Eaton is our soldier. He's also a diplomat. And he leads land forces, including Marines, from Egypt on the way to the shores of Tripoli. This is how his plan goes. He's coming out of Alexandria. He's going to take Derna, and then he's going to go around and take Tripoli. Then he's going to sweep all the way across until he gets rid of all of the Barbary pirates to the extent that they submit. Well, he has the Tripolitan leader, Shah, is a character out of Macbeth. He has murdered his brother. He's murdered his father. He has another brother, Hamid, who is actually older, and he's the rightful heir. He should be administering, but he's hiding out in Alexandria. Eaton decides that he's going to install Hamid and get rid of Yosef. Here's the Battle of Dern. You can see here are the Marines, and then here are some Arabs. There were Arab forces that were with us and against Joseph. And here off in the water are some ships. And they're important because Preble was out there, and he sealed off the sea to make sure that the land forces were unmolested by any pirates from the sea while they were making their victory. So Derna falls, and Eaton and Preble are getting ready to sweep over to the next city is in their campaign west. But there's another player here. Tobias Lear is the Arabs are ready to negotiate, but Tobias Lear is the negotiator. He's come over. He's on top of. He has the right to do that over Eaton, and he's the consul to the Barbary States. I named him as consul to the Barbary States. He was jealous of Eaton and underestimated the true value of the Dern victory. The Arabs were ready to cave in already. They saw what American firepower, particularly when it's combined with the Arabs, can do against their troops. And so they decided that, the game's up. It's time to negotiate with the United States. We can still, milk other countries. So Lear negotiates a money settlement, return of the captive sailors, but he gives up the throne back to Yusuf, and he gives back Dern. Eaton and Hamid escape on the Constellation, but both of them are dejected. And our Arab army melts into the hills, outraged at the U.S. betrayal. Back here at home, outrage also exists. The Senate committee says it's an inglorious deed, and Senator Pickering says it's nothing but the basest treachery on the basest principles. But the Senate does ratify the treaty to gain peace. Okay, why did I have this bad ambassador? He's a Yankee. He's educated at Harvard, born in New Hampshire, but he was accepted by George Washington as his personal secretary. Remember, George and I were friends. George named me as his Secretary of State. So during my time as Secretary of State, I had a lot of dealings with Lear, and I knew George trusted him as capable and discreet. He's a personal secretary. He saw a lot what George saw. So after George's death in '99 and my election the following year as president, I appointed him as an ambassador first to Santo Domingo, where they were having slave uprisings, and then as consul general to the Barbary States. In retrospect, I never should have appointed a Federalist to do my policy. It's not a good move, Tom. Ultimately, I was pleased that the pirates have been defeated. My goals have been accomplished. Our trade in Mediterranean was open. Future captives would be treated not as slaves, but as prisoners of war. And this 5-year-long war was no longer an issue in my presidency. I had some other things to think about. What were some of the things in my first administration? Yes, the Louisiana Purchase, exactly. When Spain ceded Louisiana back to New Orleans, back to France, France had some ideas about reestablishing themselves in the New World, which included invading the United States. Napoleon's brother-in-law was in charge of a bunch of soldiers whose job was just that after they cleaned up the slave rebellions in the Caribbean. They never got to do that, but that was the plan. What else was going on? Well, after we successfully completed the purchase of the Louisiana Territory, we sent out some explorers to find out what is it that we had. How many of you have read Undaunted Courage? It's a story of the taken from the diary of Meriwether Smith. So I can't resist this. That mission had a lot of problems, like hostile Indians, in addition to just the logistics of getting a team to the Pacific Ocean and back over unknown territory. And it would have failed with, and this is what they said, not my view, but I subscribe to it, would have failed if not for one person, Sacagawea, exactly. She was indispensable. She knew the Indian tribes. She knew how to deal with them. She also knew something about the country. She knew how to deal with that. It's a good idea that she's commemorated on a coin. Let's see. One other thing that you might be interested in 1802, I established something that turned out to be West Point Academy. Why did I do that? Well, among other things, I fancied myself as an amateur scientist, and I realized that if you conduct war in the United States at that time, you needed engineers. You had to, throw up earthworks. You had to tear them down. You had to build bridges to cross rivers. You had to tear them down. That's all engineering activity. And the engineers, like Kosciuszko, for example, who's Polish, he went back to fight in the European wars after our war was over. So we needed to have our own engineers. So I started an engineering school at West Point. And if you go there today, you will see that I am celebrated as the founder of West Point. It's kind of interesting because my military credentials are not the best. I became a colonel in the Virginia militia, as my father had before, mainly because I was one of the richest men in the county and could afford to outfit the soldiers. And then when I was governor of Virginia, Virginia was overrun by the British. Banastre Tarleton and the new British General Benedict Arnold came ashore and went west and actually went right up Monticello and chased me out They came in the front door while I was going out the back door, practically. Thank goodness for what we in Virginia call a Virginian Paul Revere. Has anybody heard? Anybody heard of Jack Jewett? Jack Jewett was enjoying the pleasures of a Richmond tavern, and he heard the British saying, okay, we're going to go get some of those revolutionaries out west. So he got on his horse and rode all night long to come and warn me and some of the others to get out of town. The story of my adventure in the war would be even more ignominious than it was portrayed by Patrick Henry. The Virginia, after my tour as governor, the Virginia legislature instituted an inquisition. Everybody was understandably upset that the British came and decimated, the country along the River James. But my friend George Washington came to my rescue, and the Inquisition ended with them giving me a praise for my services. So that it ended well, but I wouldn't call myself a soldier. I'm a lawyer. All right, what's the significance of the Barbary War? It's marked the start of our Navy. It marked the first time the U.S. flag was raised in victory in the Old World. And for the first time, naval and land forces had worked in concert on a large scale. And the projection of power was memorialized in the Marine anthem from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Interestingly, you just heard that they didn't make it to Tripoli, but they were on the way. It also makes a sad precedent for today's Mideast anti-Americanism. The Arabs began to fear that the U.S. is an unreliable ally. Are they fearing that today? I think so. I think so. I want to give it an acknowledgement to Brian Kilmeade's book. I have a copy of it over here. It's my copy. You can look at it, but please don't take it. If you want to know more about this subject, this book, published by Random House in 2015, Jefferson and the Tripoli Pirates, is a good book to do that. Well, thank you for your kind attention. Hopefully we have time for some questions from the audience. You can ask about any part of my career. You don't have to stick to the pirates. Yes,
You
sir.
have a question.
President Jefferson, could you answer the questions at that mic and let me have yours, please?
Thank you.
Good.
Is this working?
Done.
Hello?
Okay,
Now, any questions from the audience?
you have a question here.
Yeah, could you, I guess I was confused. There wasn't a role of privateers in going after the pirates in this case.
The role of the privateers? Well,
Authorized mercenaries or authorized
Right.
pirates.
I understand. The European nations had developed this process of sailing under what they called letters of marque. So they were pirates, but they were legal pirates. And if they went into the right port, they would be treated under the law fairly. There was not a lot of privateering going on in America. There was the next cousin to it, which was smuggling. We did a lot of smuggling through the British blockade, but the privateering would basically, the smuggling was basically something that we would do on the U.S. coast. If you wanted to venture into the Mediterranean for goods, you basically were doing it until the pirates were defeated. You were at risk of having a problem with the pirates.
Any questions? Did both France or Spain, England, they all paid these tributes to the pirates, or was just mostly England?
England and France paid a little bit, but not steadily. You know, it depended on how many ships they had in the neighborhood at the time. But the smaller countries, Sardinia was a city-state at that time, Russia, the smaller entities didn't have that kind of naval power, and so they paid up. And as I said, the amount that you have to pay kept going up and going up and going up.
With Britain having so many warships and being such an immense maritime power at the time, wasn't there any way for the United States and the other countries to get them to help out? It sounds like they could have made short shrift of the pirates.
Well, we're talking about 1881, 1801, 1805. These are times when England still believes that we are a part of England, even though they have acknowledged our independence. They're treating us as if we are just, bad children. And they're frankly pleased with what the pirates are doing to our commerce. They would like that drive us back into the hands of mother. So no, they were not ready to do that. France was having a little problem called the French Revolution. And then they had another problem, which was Napoleon. Napoleon was a fine general, but he wanted to fight on land. He was not so adept at naval battles. Admiral Lord Nelson had a couple of big victories over France and Spain's navies. So they were not big players.
Here.
Other than the principle, why was it important to even have trade? It seemed like it would be a long way away from a country still in early stages of development. Why was it critical to, in fact, have trade in the Mediterranean area?
There were lots of commodities that we liked. One of them was the one that started the country in the first place, spices. And you could get spices from the eastern side of the Mediterranean a lot better than sailing all the way around Africa and going out to find them. The goods of the old civilizations of Greece and Italy and Spain were of interest to our people, and they became more of interest as our commerce began to take off, and it did. And I like to think I had a small part in that because I negotiated a couple of commercial deals with a couple of countries.
Anything else?
These Barbary pirates, they raided all the way to England, I understand, at one time. They were able to capture people's slaves.
I think that's right, but I can't tell you what the ship was. I know we raided to England with John Paul Jones, but their ships were not really built for transoceanic conditions, and the storms in the Atlantic are pretty tough. Their ships were more fragile. They were faster, and they could point better, but they were not as seaworthy. So the Mother Nature sort of protected us, and to some extent England in that regard.
How fast the Navy grew up after the initial foundation? Was a lot of funding for the Navy?
Well, it went by fits and starts. The first 6, only 4 of them were built right away, and then the other 2 came as funding, became available. But under Madison's presidency, which followed mine, and he had to go through the war with England. Then came Monroe, and that was a period of good times, and our commerce exploded in that point, and our Navy began to as well. Good question.
Yeah, you have a question there? Could you,
So you hear someone?
you raise your hand?
No, I think people are ready to go to lunch.
Thank you again.
Thank
All
you,
right.
thank you, thank you.
I will be over here. There's some literature on the table if you want to get in touch with Thomas Jefferson or look at the book, or just take a picture with the president. I'll be available for a while. Thank you again.
President Jefferson will take any questions that you personally might have. He's right here.